I'm John Launius. Welcome to The Room. The Room gives you access to Geniecast's top thought leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, business coaches, sports celebrities, and much more. Our guests will share ideas and concepts that you may use to better your organization and propel your teams. Our guest today is founder of Immersion Neuroscience and professor at Claremont Graduate University, Paul Zak. Paul Zak is on a quest to understand neuroscience of human connection, human happiness, and effective teamwork. Paul has 2 decades of research that have taken him from the Pentagon to Fortune 50 boardrooms and today to The Room. Hi, Paul. Welcome to The Room.
Thanks, John.
So let's begin with really neuroscience and how it affects our daily lives. So how does neuroscience affect our daily lives?
I think one of the most interesting things that tell us why people are so fascinating to be around is why we make different decisions. Why you like chocolate ice cream, I like vanilla. Why you studied X in school and I studied Y. So decisions are a wonderful point to really understand the beautiful variation in human beings. And by measuring brain activity while people make decisions, my lab and my companies have been able to build technologies to really allow us to understand, treat patients more effectively, and help us build really effective teams.
So in your work, obviously there's lots of chemicals. I've heard the expression, everything is chemicals. So what are some of the chemicals of the brain you often reference or work with your work, your companies?
My lab was the first to develop a technology to measure the brain's production of a neurochemical called oxytocin, which we showed over many years of research increases empathy, connects us to other human beings, decreases stress responses, and actually makes us happier. So as we have this tool, we can ask a lot of interesting questions about how experiences affect our emotional health, how they affect our satisfaction with life, and why people are sometimes cranky even though they're nice people. And so we worked on all these factors to understand the underlying neurochemical basis for conflict, for cooperation, why people really love others at a very deep level, and why we also have conflict and unhappiness. And so I think getting into the underlying basis for, for a turn of phrase, for the meaning of life, that meaning of life looks like it's really about connecting to others, serving others, being a part of communities. And when we understand that oxytocin is a key part of that, then it gives us a way to begin to optimize the way we organize our lives, the way we organize teams, the way we accept others who seem very different from us in the decisions they make. And so I think leading up from understanding others to tolerating others to really acceptance and inclusion with others is what most of my work has been about.
So I think it's interesting that you mentioned oxytocin, because before this conversation and just right now, I only knew that word in connection with delivering babies. So can you, you talked about how it makes us feel well, things like that, but how does it connect to the delivery of babies and also then how we work on a daily basis?
Right. So this is good or bad news for listeners, but the brain's a very lazy organ because it takes so much energy to run it. And so it reuses neurochemicals that evolved for one purpose for other purposes. So oxytocin evolved from a version in fish 400 million years ago that facilitated sexual reproduction. And in mammals also is responsible for that, the hallmark of mammals, which is life, birth, care for offspring. And then around 200,000 years ago, oxytocin, which is made in the brain, started giving us more sensitivity to social information. And because of that social information, we eventually were able to begin living in big civilizations around complete strangers. Like, how do you live in New York City or Chicago or LA if you're constantly around strangers? You need something in your head that says, John safe and Bob clearly not. I want to avoid Bob, right? So anatomically, we are social creatures in the sense that our brains have very high densities of oxytocin receptors that allow us to form teams very rapidly, to figure out who we want to be around, who we don't, to identify people that we are interested romantically. And so oxytocin is really responsible for the underlying kind of essence of life. I'll call this the meaning of life earlier. These things that really give us long-term satisfaction. So the question was, how do you measure this in the brain? That's a question we struggled with around 25 years ago. In animals, you drill into the skull and you can sample oxytocin. I don't know a lot about humans, but I'm guessing having me drill into your skull is not something you want to let me do. So indeed, we developed a technology using very rapid blood draws in which we can actually capture this little spike of oxytocin released in the brain, but also in the blood. And then subsequently now have developed non-invasive ways to measure the effects of oxytocin in the brain, the peripheral nervous system. So the punchline here is that the bulk of my professional work has been about developing knowledge and technologies to allow people to live the most happy and fulfilled lives that they can. And that applies to your personal life, to your work life, to what kind of entertainment you see, what kind of education you get. And I'm very passionate about helping individuals have the tools and the understanding so that they can really live truly fulfilled lives.
So your explanation was really fantastic because you expanded, the thinking around that, and I have like 5 questions out of that. But when you look at oxytocin, you say that it is produced naturally. I also kind of understand why the producers asked me if I was comfortable with drills. I do not want you to drill into my head. But what I'm interested in is what causes oxytocin to decrease in the brain, and then how can we increase it naturally?
Right, great question. That's what we spend a lot of my time studying. So it looks like any positive social interaction will cause the brain to make oxytocin to a greater or lesser degree. So if we meet in person, John, in St. Louis, and shake your hand, I'm very famous for giving people hugs. I give you a hug. Your brain will make oxytocin. My brain will make oxytocin. It'll be a moderate amount. My little daughter comes in my room and gives me a hug. It's going to be more. So we can think of oxytocin as an index for the degree of connection that we have between individuals. So you can see how this gives us a deep pathway to understand exactly how oxytocin helps us navigate through our social lives. So once I measure it with blood draws, with wearable sensors, with the Immersion Neuroscience platform, then you can get a sense of the value, the social value my brain is placing on this person or this experience. So think of oxytocin as the biological basis for the golden rule, right? If you're nice to me, in general, my brain makes oxytocin, and that motivates me to cooperate with you. And as I said earlier, reduces my physiologic state, so my stress is lower, so that I'm not worried about being around strangers. You feel safe. I feel comfortable around you. Also increases our sense of empathy. So now I'm a much better social creature if I can understand not only what you're doing, but why you care about it. That's empathy, right? I'm able to share your emotions. So everything from hugs to dancing together to singing to soldiers marching, all these things that we do together release oxytocin if they're a positive experience. And the other factor is, we've looked at experiences and neurochemicals that inhibit oxytocin release. And the two that I think most compelling are high levels of stress. And so we do have this presumption that if you behave badly to me, I say, oh, well, John's a bad person. So we call that the fundamental attribution error. Instead of saying, hey, maybe John's having a really bad day. So again, once I understand the neuroscience and I go, hey, John's always been nice to me, now he's being super cranky, instead of me jumping to the conclusion that you're a bad person, what I should do is normally assess whether you're really having a bad day. Do you need some help from me? Do you need a hug? Do you need someone to talk to? And all those things will help reduce those stress responses and allow you to, again, release oxytocin, be a kind of fully developed human. The other factor that's interesting that inhibits oxytocin release is high levels of testosterone, which you and I had as youngsters. So testosterone is very high in young males and decreases after you get to be about age 30. That's exactly in these high testosterone times when we see lack of empathy, we see more aggression, we see more crime being committed. So again, we have an understanding from the work my lab has done and others of why we see this spike in so-called bad behavior particularly by boys, sometimes by girls. So I think what's fascinating here is if we play chess, John, and you win a chess match, your testosterone is going to go up. And that means you're going to have a little less empathy. You'll be a little more self-focused. You'll be a little more aggressive because you've just gained some social status. So that's the sense in which I'm talking about toleration of others. Our brains live in a soup of about 200 neurochemicals, and we're not aware of what those neurochemicals are and how they're trying to change to help us adapt to our environments. And so I think a lot of the messages from my talks and my books, the writing I've done, has been about really understanding humans from this neuroscience biological basis so that we have a little deeper and more subtle understanding of these variations in behaviors and where they come from.
Paul, such great explanations, great overview. I look forward to continuing the conversation in just a moment. We'll be right back with more from Paul Zak and how we can measure the brain's connection to our experiences. You're watching The Room.
Introducing Genietalk, the latest offering from Geniecast, the #1 virtual event and experience company. With Genietalk, you can connect with an expert on any subject, anywhere, at any time. It's a one-to-one conversation in a private video call on our safe and secure platform. It's not a presentation. It's not a speech. It's an engaging, informative conversation with an expert. Whether it's a C-suite, business author, or prominent speaker, they are on Genietalk. Just search for what you're interested in, from leadership to marketing, to motivation, to diversity and inclusion, and more. Find one of our many experts on that topic. Then set up a time to meet virtually. We'll connect your calendars to find a convenient time. Next, we'll send a link, and then the virtual call happens. Payment is simple and easy through our easy-to-use platform. It's the ultimate fast, frictionless way to speak to an expert about anything, anywhere, anytime. That's Genietalk.
We're back with Paul Zak, founder of Immersion Neuroscience and professor at Claremont Graduate University. So, Paul, can you tell us about your company, Immersion, and the great work you're doing in that area?
Thanks, John. So, none of us want to see a bad movie or have a bad class with a terrible teacher. We don't want to have a boring romantic partner, right? We really want extraordinary experiences. As I said earlier, those extraordinary experiences, those peak moments of your life, add to your overall life satisfaction. So once we had done all this work in the laboratory, the next question was, how do we make this available to the general public? How could we actually create a platform that would democratize neuroscience so that anybody could measure what the brain loves any place people are doing interesting things? So 4 years ago, we started this company, Immersion Neuroscience, that pulls data from wearables like smart watches and then shoots that data to the cloud and applies algorithms so we can measure this neurologic state I've called immersion. So immersion has a second neurochemical. Of course, oxytocin's in there, tells about the emotional resonance of that information, how much you care about it. But it turns out to have a great experience, the first thing you got to do is pay attention. That attention is driven by the brain's production of dopamine. So in this very unusual state where I'm attentive and I really care about the experience, we see great things happening. We see students do better in school. We see employees gaining more from corporate training programs. We see individuals who can decide which movies they should put into production. We see better marketing and advertising. So across all these domains, our clients use the subscription service Immersion Neuroscience so that they can measure, not having to come to the laboratory, but they can measure whether the brain is really valuing this experience second by second and create better experiences for the whole world. And I should say, John, I'm a cheap guy. I hate to see wasted resources. And it blows my mind that even today, in the last 30 years, 80% of Hollywood movies lose money. How is that possible? I think it's possible because we're using this, biased evaluation mechanism called the human brain. Right? So if I'm tired, if I'm hungry, if I'm having a bad day, I'm going to evaluate a piece of content differently. I will evaluate an experience differently. But once I have a piece of technology that allows me to measure what the brain loves second by second, and we've made that available to anybody, then we can go back and go, okay, what is really going on here? So we can capture what the brain loves and give people more of that. One of the most interesting applications we've seen companies use this technology recently is for diversity and inclusion. So as people go back to work post-COVID lockdowns, as we want to really create diverse and inclusive workspaces, measuring not only immersion, but psychological safety passively and physiologically. Are people comfortable? Are we creating an environment where everyone can flourish? Those are some of the metrics on the platform. And again, my whole focus of my professional life has been to help people live more fulfilling and successful lives, and to see this technology being used from tiny startups to Fortune 50 companies is really exciting for me, and it just makes me so happy that we've created something that can really help the world in general, but people particularly.
Yeah, that's so great. I mean, you talked a lot about the benefits that people are taking from your research with the wearables. In your opinion, is there an area that businesses should be focusing on in creating experiences as the world is reopening that they're not currently doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. We see that in several areas. So the first is, are people going to go back to work? So how do we manage hybrid meetings? I think there's a lot of evidence suggesting that people may go into the office 1 or 2 days a week. Some people will be fully remote. So we've seen clients struggle with having people who are remote working in their little office at home be fully engaged with their teams. So how do we modulate that? So this goes from onboarding new employees to training to managing daily meetings. So we've got to really understand who needs to be in the office, how much time we need to spend together. Do we need a happy hour? Do we need some downtime just to get to know each other? So what we found in my published research and my last book, Trust Factor, is that having actually connection time, we're not really talking about work, we're just hanging out, playing ping pong or going to happy hour, is really essential to engagement at work, effective teamwork, and higher levels of productivity. When we're doing everything remotely in a 2D world, that kind of chit-chat is harder to do, right? We're scheduling meetings every hour. We're busy people. We have to get stuff done. But in the office, we have these random interactions. We bump into people. Hey, how was your weekend? You got a new dog. Oh, let me see the picture of that, right? So that kind of discussion is harder to have online. So one thing we found that's useful for my research is doing what I call an emotional check-in, even if you're just doing this remotely, which is, I'll do it with you, John. Hey, John, you look, and then fill in an adjective, tired, happy, sad, joyful, right? Then we can have a different kind of conversation and connect emotionally. And if I'm an effective leader, I do not want to avoid that emotional information. It's very powerful. It tells me what I can do to help you be successful and therefore help our team and our organization be successful. So these are really data-driven insights by knowing what to measure in the brain so that we can assess objectively how effectively individuals and teams are working together.
Such a great conversation today. There's 50 more questions I have, so I kind of wish we had another hour. But when we come back, we'll have more with Paul Zak and our 5 questions. After this break, you're watching The Room. Welcome back. We're talking with Professor of Neuroscience, Paul Zak. Every week on The Room, we ask our guests the same 5 questions. Now, Paul, as someone who looks to understand and create experiences, we hope you'll appreciate how we're collecting insights on specific topics to provide our audience with tools that they can use to accelerate their ability to achieve their personal goals. Are you ready for your 5 questions?
Let's go.
All right, number 1. What do you see as the biggest opportunities that businesses aren't taking advantage of in the world today?
I really think it's scale. So I think what we learned from the COVID lockdowns is that we can work at scale. And once we begin to think about how to scale not only technology, but people, then the impact of things like service providing, education, delivery, all that becomes better. So scale, I think, is the big issue that businesses have to address in this post-COVID world.
I love that you mentioned scale. That's something that sometimes, it's on people's minds, but to really, be aware of it and really think about how to create that, not only with yourself, but also everybody around you. So important. So number 2, if you could have one conversation with one person from any time or anywhere, who would it be and why?
Such a tough question. One of my degrees is in mathematics. I love all the great, weird mathematicians. So I'm a huge fan of Newton, Isaac Newton, who invented calculus, and he was the checker of the Treasury in England. And Newton was a weird dude. Was into numerology and tried to do alchemy. So I would love to sit for a couple hours and talk to Isaac Newton. I know it's a super nerdy answer, but he's a strange character. So I think it would be the most interesting conversation.
Not nerdy at all. I'm a big Pythagoras guy, so we can A squared plus B squared equals C squared all day long. We can do that. All right. Number 3, what is one book every person in business should read and why? My
favorite business book, hands down, including the ones I've written, is in fact not one of my books, but The Experience Economy by Pine and Gilmore was updated last year. I think 2019, actually. The Experience Economy is about how to move from providing basic commodities to providing services to creating extraordinary experiences. And those extraordinary experiences not only have high profit margins, but they're very sticky. They create loyal employees. They create evangelists for the company. So the Experience Economy is the first thing I would read. It's amazing.
Fantastic. All right, number 4, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
So funny. I just told this to my daughter yesterday. As an undergraduate in a finance class, I had a professor say, the most important thing in investing is to pay yourself first. In other words, if you are short this month, you can't pay your utility bill, the electric company actually will give you a couple of months of, dispensation, so you don't have to pay it. But if you actually consistently save, then you get the magic of compounding. That's got to be first. I think in all areas of life, you've got to pay yourself first. It's like being on the airplane when the oxygen is running low. Put your mask on first. If you don't save yourself, you can't save anybody else. So I think paying yourself first is really about creating the opportunity so that you can be of service to others as much as possible. And the first thing is keeping yourself healthy, focused, eating well, good diet, exercise. To me, that's paying yourself first. I'm going to invest in myself because when I do that, I can be of service to my family, to my friends, to my company. So I think paying yourself first is great advice.
Yeah, and I think that totally relates to what you were talking about earlier about hugging me versus hugging your daughter. I mean, if you're in that state yourself, you're really paying yourself first, giving that space so you can create more of those great chemicals. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, exactly right. So again, if I'm not healthy, if I'm stressed out, if I'm cranky, I'm not being a good parent. I'm not being a good spouse. I'm certainly not going to be a good employee. And so I think from a leadership perspective, understanding, again, the underlying neuroscience, if my employees are not sleeping well, if they come in, if I see you, John, and you just look beat up and tired, that could be your kid had the flu. Okay, that's a different story. But I always feel like, look, if you're having a bad day, I don't have you go home and catch up on sleep and come back tomorrow and hit it hard for 8 or 9 hours, then just struggle through and take up space. So I'm much more invested in individuals as human beings than as employees or workers, or use whatever word you want. So once you're invested in that, then you have these long-term relationships. As someone famous said, I've forgotten, that the war for talent is over, talent has won. So if you're a leader, how do you sustain that talent? It's really creating an environment where people can flourish personally, professionally, and even spiritually, whatever that means to you. So you've got to be worried about managing the whole person. And when you do that, then that community, that organization will continue to flourish long term.
Such a great follow-up. All right, question number 5. Why is a conversation better than a lecture?
Oh gosh, lectures are the worst. As a college professor, I don't lecture anymore. I've done this flipped classroom. It's all discussion. I think it's really recognizing that even someone who is not very well trained on a topic, the most naive question from college freshmen are sometimes the most profound. And by having that discussion, by enabling everyone to have a voice, not only is the experience better for everybody, and the data clearly show that, but even as the leader of that discussion, that is much more interesting to me. I don't want to hear me talk anymore. I've talked too much. I probably talked too much on this interview, John. I should let you talk more. But at the same time, it is much more valuable to everybody when we have following this route of interesting ideas and interesting tangents and taking that conversation where it goes. So there's no question that a conversation is way better than a lecture. And now I'm absolutely embarrassed that I've spoken so much.
Not at all, Paul. I could listen to you talk for another hour, and that's not a joke. Well, we are at the end of our time together. I'd like to thank Paul Zak for being my guest on The Room and sharing his thoughts and insights. Such a great conversation. Paul, what would you like to leave us with today?
I was thinking a couple years ago, Time Magazine asked me to write a little blurb for New Year's, like New Year's resolutions. And they said something that will help people, have a better year. And so I'm a math guy, so I created this little simple equation or formula, if you will, which I call Love Plus. So my goal is to, every interaction I have, my goal is to increase the amount of love in the world. And I don't mean that in a romantic way. I mean in the sort of philia way. I want to be able to make that person a little happier, be of service to that person. And so I think if we use this Love Plus rule, am I actually creating love in the world when I have interactions? I don't think you can go wrong. I think it's a simple way to encapsulate what it means to really be a good human being, to be a fulfilled human being, to be virtuous, to be happy. And so here's a trick to do that for listeners, which is I try to end every conversation with the word service. Right? So I'll do that with you, John. John, thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it immensely, and I want to be of service to you. So please, anything you need, I'd be happy to help you with, and you have my contact information. Just let me know how I can be of service to you.
Paul, I love that. When you were talking about the expression of love, I went to my time with the Dalai Lama. I spent a week with the Dalai Lama in the 1990s. And when you talk about like the word love, obviously, for some people, it kind of freaks them out in modern day America. But one's ability to be able to create that true connection and that feeling of love, for lack of a better term, I don't think we should be afraid to share that. And so it is an aspect of service. It is an aspect of respect. And I very much appreciate the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Join us next week when our guest will be CEO of the Medici Group and author of The Medici Effect, Frans Johansson. Frans has inspired leaders and audiences worldwide with his ideas on leadership, success, innovation, and diversity and inclusion. I'm John Launius. We'll see you next time on The Room.